Hi YouTube. Do you ever feel like you don't have any control in critical conversations? Like there are so many things on your mind, but you cannot really say what you want, and it almost feels like the conversation is happening to you rather than that you're really there. So today I want to talk to you about a couple of very powerful techniques that can really help you to feel that sense of presence and to get more control in your conversations. What I want to start off with today is I want to talk about conversations. What is the basic idea that we have of conversations? What is the goal of a conversation? And what are the common problems? What are the problems that I experience? And then I want to discuss the methods that I've tried for the past week. I wanted to find out how can I become less reactive and take more control over the conversation so I can give the inputs that I want to give. Whether or not they're good is secondary for this point. So, if we look at the general concept of conversation, you can see that there are usually two people involved. Let's say two people, two parties, to keep it simple. It can, of course, be a coffee machine talk where there are multiple people involved. It can be a meeting with a speaker and an audience. But let's say for now you have two parties, person A, person B. You're always in three modes. So either you are listening, you're thinking, or you're speaking. And while you are listening, then the other person should be speaking, and vice versa. If you are speaking, the other person should be listening. What are you doing when you're speaking and the other person is listening? You are actually trying to transfer information from your side to the other side. And that's what we call, that's a framework for a conversation. The basic idea is this, that every time you have a conversation, the goal is somewhere around the fact that you want to influence behavior. So it can be that you want to influence your own behavior because maybe there are things that you are missing, pieces of information that you know or that you don't even know you don't know, right? So when you want to learn something from someone else, it is perfectly fine if that person speaks more and you listen more, because that's the way, that's the goal of the conversation, is for you to learn more. You really want to try and keep that balance, right? So you want to be heard, but you also want to hear what the other person has to say. And finally, I want to say the following, that if you have a couple of ideas about some techniques maybe that you read online or you watched a YouTube video of, that said that if you do X, then Y will happen to most people because people are wired in a certain way, right? So you had a kind of a formula, you have a model of what a person should do, how people should respond. Given a certain input, there will be a determined or relatively determined output. However, you can wish for a certain output. If you cannot control the input you give to that system, you are lost, basically. We cannot fix that. So the bare basic, the first principle, you have to be able to control the conversation in such a way that you are not reactive, responsive, emotional, and that you can say what you want to say. So now that we have established what we find as the ultimate goal for conversation is to transmit information between two parties in order to influence behavior. And we've also talked a little bit about the fact that you have to be able to give your input to a conversation without being emotionally affected by what the other person was saying. The feeling of being taken for a ride by a conversation or by a different person is not nice, but it has a lot to do with how you position yourself in that conversation. So, the four methods that I've tried were silence, slower pace, mirroring, paraphrasing, and labeling. The last two, the mirroring / paraphrasing and the labeling, are both techniques from Chris Voss. He wrote a very nice book called Never Split the Difference. I will link it in the comments. I will not link it in the comments. I will link it in the description. And also, I saw a very cool video with him and Andrew Huberman where they were also going in depth on all these kinds of conversational and negotiation techniques. So if you haven't watched that, it's a really good one. I really recommend it. Basically, he is an ex FBI hostage negotiator, and he has a lot of knowledge about very, very powerful conversation techniques. And I just use these two because I think they apply the best here. Because, like I said, for the first step, it's not so much about what do we want to achieve in the conversation specifically, but it's about, I would say, creating more sense of presence and control, and slowing down your own response. So that's why silence and slower pace go both very nicely hand in hand. So silence basically means, there's this kind of famous rule, I guess, that if someone says something to you that is emotionally triggering, first try to count to 10, right? But no one does it because, well, who the hell counts to 10 in the middle of a conversation? That's a little bit odd, right? Like you would not, it sounds strange. 10 seconds is a really long time. But you could go more into the range of 5 seconds, which is definitely doable. Sounds a little bit less weird. And that extra time just gives you so much more to think and to internally digest what has been said. And that you realize that, oh, no, I don't want to respond in this way. I want to respond in a slightly more nuanced way. The same goes for slower pace. Partially, you give yourself more time by speaking slowly, but at the same time, you also give the other person more time to think. So the message will land much, much better if you slow down. Now, I want to make one kind of analogy here, which I find very interesting, um, because that the feeling of being in control is a kind of confidence that you have. There was a person who said that teenagers are usually not very confident, but they try to feign confidence by making their bodies use more space than they actually need. There's this kind of concept that if you use a lot of space, if you are really present and you are comfortable, that signals that you are confident. So that can be true. I think usually it has something to do with taking the appropriate amount of space that you deserve and feel comfortable with taking it. Don't feel like you need to apologize yourself for being here, so you're trying to make yourself much smaller. And then what teenagers tend to do is they try to fake that by taking up more space. So they kind of got the signaling like, oh, it has something to do with the amount of space that I'm taking while being comfortable, but they overdo it. So there's an overshoot, and that's where you can actually kind of see that they're not really confident. So similarly, so why am I saying this? Because the same is true for speech. If someone takes the right amount of time to say something, then you will know that that person is confident in saying what he wants to say, because you take the appropriate amount of time, the appropriate amount of space to say what you want to say. Finally, the last two, the paraphrasing and mirroring and the labeling, have a lot to do with trying to poke the other person to reveal more, to speak more, to open up about their emotions and what they want to say. And what you achieve by that is, again, not responding yourself, because these are kind of, you don't even need to think about it that much, how to do these things. So they enable you not to respond at all. Your first response will just be kind of automatic, but not reactive. So the mirroring basically just means you repeat the last three words that the person said with an upward inflection. So as an example, you might say, for instance, this weekend I will go to my first Christmas market. And then the response, and if you want to mirror that person, you could say, your first Christmas market? You see, so you didn't even ask formally a question. You just repeated the last three words and you added an upward inflection, which makes that other person feel like, oh, I need to explain more. There they go. The other way, paraphrasing, is a bit more sophisticated way. It's basically whatever the person said, you try to summarize what they said and say, is this correct? Is this what you said, basically? And that as well makes the person feel like you heard them. You didn't give any input, but you do get the feedback if you also indeed understood what the person said. And finally, the labeling is that you try to learn what the other person really thinks and then suggest a certain feeling. Okay, I can give you an example. It's always in the sense that you use it sounds like, it seems like, it feels like. If a person is really talking enthusiastic about this, about a certain topic, you might say, it sounds like you're really into this topic. And then that person will respond to that by saying yes or no. And you didn't really say anything, you just observed what was happening. So now that you know the techniques that I tried, I want to give a couple of examples of what I really did. I can give like a bit of general ideas that I had, but I also want to give some specific examples. So what I did at my work, I had some meetings with people via Teams, and I recorded the conversations with them where I tried to apply the techniques. And I don't want to play them back because I feel like I should inform those people first if I did. But I listened back to them and I found the pieces where it really worked as like kind of clear examples. So I want to give you these examples so you can see how that would happen. So one conversation I had a talk with my project lead where I was asking him for feedback. When we were talking about my performance, I managed to use the mirroring technique a lot. Maybe he was already talking for 4 or 5 minutes. I was just sitting there acknowledging, saying yes, yes, yes. Okay, I understand. Then he like came kind of to a conclusion, which is not a conclusion, but he was done. And I used the last three words and mirrored that back to him. And then he could go a little bit longer. And actually, usually if I did that, he would say things that are really more in-depth explanation of what he said before. So he would continue on that same line of thought or maybe even reiterate, but then for himself also with a little bit more clarity of, okay, what do I actually want to say? So that was really, really powerful. After this mirroring a couple of times, I found out that if he reiterated what he wanted to say, it sounded very, very positive for me. So what I then did was I put a label on it and said, it sounds like you are satisfied with my work. And there was a bit of silence, and then he said, yeah, yeah, actually I do think that I'm very satisfied with your work in my project. So that was really great that he wouldn't have said it by himself, but just because you could see that you make him speak more, which makes him realize things, and then you point it out. You just observe. You say, it seems like you're pretty satisfied, actually. That's how we got there. So that was a really nice experience for me. The second conversation I had was where I could use silence pretty well. There was a conversation that I had with my manager. I was in the process of transferring to a different group, but something happened and it didn't go through. So we had some small talk, and then he came out with, how are your thoughts after the mess of last week? And I had a lot of thoughts about the mess of last week, so but I started counting in my head, and luckily we were also on team, so I could just like kind of, I was really like counting 1, 2. It took me about 6 seconds, and then he started speaking again. So he said, you must have lost your faith in humanity. And then I could laugh a little bit about it. But I think that was really, it seems so small, right? Because I just waited a couple of seconds and he said something additional, but that broke away the tension because I could laugh about what he was saying and I was not in that very triggered mindset. I still said after that what I wanted to say, but I said it from a completely different space. And I think that's only possible if you take your time also to allow to happen what will happen if you are quiet. And then the rest of the conversation went just really, really gentle and slow. I could keep my pace very, very low. And I think, yeah, these conversations wouldn't have gone this way if I wouldn't have implemented the techniques. So, having said all these things, I think I really love trying these things out, and I'm also excited to continue to try to implement these techniques and maybe some others from Chris Voss or others as well. Like I said, this was just a starting point to really get into the topic from a point of control and focus so that we can go out and try different things with the control already present in the conversation. I do want to say a couple more things. So, um, if you are typically reactive in conversations or triggered, this can really help. But there's also a flip side. Instead of increasing the time that you have to respond, you can also increase the resilience that you have for getting triggered. I think it has a lot to do with mindset. So some people are just so calm and factual that they're not affected by things. But it is a thing you can train. So a practice that I've been doing for quite a while now is, for instance, taking cold showers in the morning or even taking a cold bath. It puts you in a state where you are very uncomfortable, but you're going in there with a free will. Let's say you are accepting this uncomfort and you are not letting it affect you. And that is a way where you can really train willpower and I don't know how to say it, the skill of not getting affected by exterior factors. I think that's really something that we should try and learn as a society because people get triggered all the time for very small things that are completely out of their control or even out of a field that would influence them. It's just something that they read or see. And then another great practice is actually from the Islamic um, tradition, which is fasting. I know the Christians also have it, but they're not practicing it anymore. So, and I think fasting in the Islamic tradition is better because you are not only not eating, but you're also not drinking during the whole day. So from sunrise till sunset. And with the addition, which is very, very smart, I think, is that you are not allowed to get angry. So if you are fucking hungry and thirsty, it's very easy to snap at people, right? So, but this is the rule. So you are fasting, but you're also not allowed to get angry, which is so smart because it really trains you to keep your emotions in check. And yeah, I've done it now for a couple of years. 1 year was really the full Ramadan month, and I can really recommend it to people. If you don't want to do it religiously, that's perfectly fine. I'm not saying convert. I'm just saying look into doing that. If not for a month, like try it for 1 day or try it for a couple of days, or just use this idea of putting yourself in a mindset. What can I do that I really don't like to do, or something that put my is putting my body under stress? With the additional condition that I cannot get upset with other people, I have to be nice and friendly, or at least not get upset. I think these are some nice ideas that you can play around with to see how can I train myself to be more calm and centered in situations of stress. And I think these will also enable you to say the things you want to say that you think you should say in critical conversations. Well, so this was my first episode, guys. I hope you really liked it. Let me know what you think. I hope you had a nice time, and I'm also curious to hear if these techniques are new for you, or if you already tried some of these, or if there are any other ones that I should look into. I hope you have a wonderful day and that you enjoyed the content. Thank you.